your company is going to have haters. And the thing is, you want haters. More startups die from not having people pay attention to them. And so haters those are people who are paying attention to you. They are signal boosting you. And most people criticizing you weren't going to be your customers anyway. So let them signal boost you instead.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Something New, the podcast where we talk about interesting things going on in tech for people building something new. Or at least people aspiring to build something new. I'm Leeor.
And I'm Steph.
Think of us as a bit of a technical how I built this, but maybe a little bit less Guy Raz and a little bit more Guy Riz.
This is the peak, and then we're going downhill from here.
I'm using my podcast voice.
Hello.
Hey, Steph. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute. I know people have been awaiting our return. Actually, which is not completely a lie. I have gotten a couple of very kind LinkedIn DMs, Twitter DMs, friends pestering me whether we're still going or not. And I have to tell them season 2 is coming, and now it's here.
It's finally here. Yeah, no. Same thing. It's been fun getting some of those nudges, and so I'm glad we're making it happen.
We are. And the irony of me being in your office to record this while you were not here, but that's another story.
Well, that's just what a good VC does,
Yes, they're never around. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Which actually is not far from the truth. Of the 4 VCs who were supposed to be in this office, only one of them is in town today. So I think that is very telling.
100%. It is a little scary in that way. But, we're out and about meeting founders and doing all that kind of fun stuff. So maybe we can make that argument.
Well, you have some exciting life updates. You're married. You have a new fund.
Yeah, a lot of things. Live in New York now. I really just decided to do all 3 things at once.
I think you lived in New York during our last episode. I feel like I have this background of yours permanently ingrained in my memory. Oh
yes, it's known as not real looking. Let's see. So I guess I maybe moved to New York towards the end of season 1, and then I started a fund. Got married. I guess getting married was awesome. That was in April. Nothing has changed except for the fact that when I have conversations with people in their 50s and 60s, I feel like they have some form of more of a kinship with me.
Right.
We both have if I talk to a man or woman who's a little bit older, they'll it's like they have a ball and chain too, and so I'm of course, totally. It's just a way for me to connect with folks like that.
Which is great because you're now fundraising from LPs, which I imagine are mostly 50 and 60-year-old men. So that sounds very helpful for you.
That is traditionally the case. And that part's been good. We are officially in business. And so this is non-soliciting, or whatever, make sure that I'm not doing any, anti-SEC things or whatever. But we are raising a fund. We did our first close a month ago, and made our first 2 investments. And so out in business and whatnot. Fund is called Formation, kind of akin to some of the ethos of Something New, frankly. It's a stage of investing that I've always gravitated to, since I was at Floodgate, which is really digging in with founders through the ideation process and helping them, while they, think about marrying or killing ideas or kind of juking and jiving around insights. As an example of that, our second investment was an investment in 2 founders, and I'll share more when we can. But at the high level, it was founders that we met, extremely bright. And when we first met them a year ago, they had a half-page Google Doc, and were thinking about this concept. And over the course of time, helped them, kind of marry or kill certain parts of the concept. Helped their early go-to-market docs, kind of made some, bunch of kind of relevant intros and whatnot, helped validate the idea for them and for us, got to spend more time with them. And so by the time they were raising, we were kind of just ready to kind of work together. And so that's kind of what we'll do predominantly. That's kind of 2/3 of our investment style. In some cases, we'll do that on a one-on-one basis. And additionally, we also will run these cohorts for founders where we'll pair up with an exited founder, some of our previous guests even, to help founders through this process as well. And then a bit of what we do, we will take a look occasionally at kind of more kind of quote unquote normal deals as opposed to people flow in the kind of first chunk of investments, those will usually be in spaces that we have a prepared mind for. In many cases have some traction, but are kind of overlooked by the market. I don't necessarily say this to the founders to their face in some cases, but internally we call them ugly duckling seats. And that's because usually it's something that's been like neglected by the market, or there's something weird about it. Like maybe they're approaching a market that maybe VCs are not super excited by or whatever. And from our perspective, that's an opportunity. And so our first investment was a company that was in a space that I think some VCs get, but a lot don't. I think, it's been very good so far in that investment. And I think that'll be a situation where folks will wake up to the opportunity in the coming months.
Yeah, I thought what would be exciting for this like short intro before our first guest is I'm genuinely actually really curious to learn more about like your fundraising process.
Sure.
Like obviously very familiar with founder fundraising process, but now I have more friends who are kind of like branching off on their own and starting VC funds, and it sounds really hard, although lots of similarities. And then also it reminds me, I tweeted this thing like maybe a year ago, and it was not one of my more viral tweets, but it was one of the more controversial ones that I got a lot of hate DMs for. And I tweeted something kind of jokingly being like, the only thing more insufferable than a founder fundraising is a VC fundraising for like their first ever fund who like claims they're even busier than a founder, or like that fundraising is even harder than for a founder. I was inspired because a lot of my friends of friends who were kind of emerging to become VCs, I think would empathize with the struggle of being a founder, but like seemed to complain that it was like 10 times worse, which I also don't, whatever. I have no opinions on that. This is not a contest in like who's more miserable, but I thought that was pretty funny. So anyway, want to get to the truth. Is it actually more miserable? I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
Absolutely not. That's an absurd statement by these people. Now, like, look, I think the difficulty on the fundraising side specifically, like overall, like clearly being a founder of a company is like way more difficult. Like just the fact that you don't have to deal with people problems in and of itself, just by only having one or two people on your team, because I have a partner, like makes it just a lot more straightforward. Like that, and that's even before you get to every other thing about being a founder of a company that's harder. For a fund, especially for a first time fund, I mean, you have your track record, you have your thesis, you have your kind of right to win. And it's definitely not easy. Like it takes time because it's not like you're offering something where you can show like, hey, like here's, the product that I have, or here are some early customers. I mean, you have a version of that perhaps with people who will vouch for you, but it's all kind of reputation based. And so it's definitely tricky and it's not easy by any means. And it's a different kind of fundraising process, because by the time like you're raising the kind of amounts that fund managers are raising, like usually you have like a product and real revenue and something tangible, and that money is going into the business. And so I think it's a very different type of fundraising process. Also, the folks that you raise from are quite different too. I mean, there's some overlap, of course, but you have a lot of like family office types and fund of funds and all sorts of other types of entities that aren't as known, perhaps. Like there's so many people that I've met throughout this process that I would have never known existed really before. And they're wonderfully smart people, like wealthier than probably I'll ever be. But, you just don't get exposure to them through like the normal process. And so, yeah, different, definitely, and definitely not easy. And it is difficult, but not close to the whole experience of being a founder. No. I definitely think VCs are more willing to take that bet. I mean, between my co-founder and I, like we do have a track record and we have like good companies in our portfolios. And so I don't know, like, while I'm definitely not like at the end of the spectrum where I've been a GP at like a fund for 10 years, which is like a different like level to what I'm raising at. I'm still someone who has like a little bit more than just like, someone who's like not doing this for the first time. So I think it's possible that I don't have like that lived experience where someone who like knows that they can do it, but have never done it before, is trying to prove that they could. But to me, it's just also like, I kind of don't blame LPs for thinking to themselves, all right, this person has no track record. They have some people that kind of like them. They have a thesis that's like somewhat interesting, but I don't know if they're going to actually hold to their thesis. I don't know if they're going to hold to their check size. I think where we've gotten some early credit is that our first couple of investments were the size that we said that we were going to do and the ownership that we said we were going to get. I think a lot of emerging managers, especially fund one folks, say they're going to get X percent and get like a lot less than that, sometimes 20% of that percentage. And so I think a lot of LPs have been burned by kind of folks saying they're going to be able to accomplish something and not be able to do that. I think we come at it from the perspective of being like at least somewhat experienced investors. And so we get the benefit of the doubt on some dimension. And I think I'd like to think that our early examples prove that we're doing that as well.
Yeah. And I guess before we wrap up and introduce our guest, what kind of founders are you looking for? You mentioned like super early, obviously very smart people. You mentioned the ugly ducklings. Is there any like thing, thesis, anything else that you're excited about or kind of actively looking for right now?
Yeah, I mean, the spaces we're spending more time in, vertical AI, healthcare, kind of like old world industries, like unsexy industries, a little bit of fintech.
What are some examples, by the way? What are some examples of like old world industries?
Yeah, we had Phil in season 1. That's a good example. Arch kind of selling, sales planning and engineering software to HVAC. And so there's other examples that we'll look at that, selling, into government. Our first investment is selling into public safety. And so those are examples where it's like not exactly the normal, like hot ticket, normal VC backable thing, whatever. Of course, we'll do some of that too. And so we are looking at like some, there's something of the day that's like more AI infra related, but it's more of like a founder relationship where we've had a chance to get to know them over the course of time. And yeah, that's kind of the spaces that we'll look in. And then, people can reach out to me, Leeor at formationvc.com, like chatting with a lot of different folks who are kind of on the ideating process. And to me, I see it more as like, a journey so that we can figure out if we want to go on a 10-year journey together. And rather than like a deal.
I'm laughing because it sounds so cheesy, but I really do know you're being so earnest. And I really
am being earnest. That. Like it is like year 4, like when there's like shit hitting the fan, like it sounds like so trite. And so I sometimes like if I hear myself saying it, I'm like, wow, this sounds so cheesy. But it's just like, when you're 4 years into something and you've been through the ringer with someone and like, you want to make sure that like, in year 5, you're still excited to work with them. And I hope they feel the same way on the other end of the spectrum, or else the next 5 years are going to be pretty shitty. So.
Yeah. The parallels of relationships and dating and VC and fundraising will never end. So
yeah, no doubt.
Very wise advice. Do you want to introduce our guest today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Niels from Mentava is someone I got a chance to know back in my Floodgate days. Mentava is trying to do the ambitious thing of trying to teach, 2 to 3-year-olds how to read. And basically Niels was kind of toying with different ideas and essentially had like a what if we could do this kind of moment with teaching our children, reading comprehension at like almost like an unfathomably young age, and realized that this was possible from kind of some of his research and from what he was seeing on couple of like projects that he did on his own to kind of verify this idea for his own kids. More recently, we also get into our conversation on a situation where Niels essentially was someone tried to cancel what Mentava was doing because there are some people in this world that believe that teaching small children to read is a bad thing. And we get into that a little bit and how Niels was able to effectively use that moment as a way to kind of catapult the company. Because a lot of people like saw this thing go viral and they realized that it was kind of stupid and realized they wanted their kids to be able to use Mentava too. And we talk about that in the episode as well. But, just someone who's working on something extremely ambitious, important, and a really interesting business model around it too. So excited to have Niels from Mentava. Niels, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Maybe before we get into Mentava, would love to just like get to know you a little bit better and at least the audience get to know you a little bit better. Maybe just who are you? Like, where'd you grow up? What got you interested in tech at the outset?
I kind of stumbled my way back into the industry. So I grew up in Maryland, just outside DC. I was really fortunate to have a really good public education experience. So, through a combination of independent study and accelerated programs, I just had a really good experience. And I guess that's a big part of why I started Mentava, because I've seen all those programs get cut over the years and deprioritized, and it was very sad. But I think I was, I guess I would say I kind of stumbled back into tech. I knew that I wanted to do entrepreneurship for a long time, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I ended up in grad school for a while, which is probably the worst mistake of my life. I tried doing...
Relatable.
Yeah.
Don't say that. That's where you met me in grad school. So that was great.
Yeah, no, exactly, Leeor, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I could say that, yeah. College was also, maybe not some great decisions, but, I came out of it. I did an internship. So I was doing a PhD in electrical engineering. I ended up doing an internship. I looked around at everybody that I was working with, and I was like, there is nobody here whose life I sort of aspired to have in 30 years. And that was just a very clear sign that I was on the wrong track. Everybody I looked at who I thought they're doing really cool stuff, they're all entrepreneurs. They're all doing cool stuff. So even from my early 20s, I knew that was a direction I wanted to go. It took me 20 years to figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
But I tried it early on. I didn't know what I was doing. I tried services. I tried sales. I was cold calling. I tried starting a magazine, selling stuff on eBay, internet marketing. I ended up on food stamps at one point, ran out of money. And after job hunting for a year, called my parents, and I was like, I'm out of money. I'm borrowing rent money from my roommate. I'm going to come back home. I have one job interview. I'm going to get through this job interview. If I don't get it, I am going to have to come home and live with you guys again. I was 29, and basically I got that job. So that's how I got into tech. I was a marketing grunt, getting paid, $55K a year at Tableau Software, and that was my first real job at age almost 30.
So were your parents bummed that you got the job, or were they excited to hike in their house?
I think they were excited to see me get back on a career track again, and be able to pay my bills. And education was a very strong value in my family, and there's sort of this mentality that as long as you work hard and as you get educated, then things will work out. And so that's how I ended up going through, going to college, going to grad school, and then being very confident. Well, I have a good education, things will work out. And then the 2008 financial crisis happened and everything crashed, and there were no jobs anywhere, even if you had an electrical engineering degree. And that was when I think my parents understood, after 9 months of really job hunting hard, they realized how hard it was for me, and they were just happy to see me land somewhere.
In that moment, when you're about to get the job at Tableau, did you have any wherewithals or any idea that you might end up, kind of starting Mentava or even doing something along those lines in the future in education? Because when you look at your background, you have gaming, you have tech, you have some ed tech as well. And so you actually have the perfect background to start where you ended up starting. But maybe the lines are being drawn in reverse. So just curious, at that moment of hardship, did you kind of know where things were going to lead, or did you have an idea of where you wanted to go?
I had goals. I always knew that I wanted to start my own thing. I didn't know exactly what that was going to be. There are lots and lots of false starts over my life. It's kind of funny because certainly when I interview or when I tell my story, the pieces do kind of get put together in retrospect. But at the time, it was, I'm bad at interviewing. I should just put that out there. I interviewed at the Fangs so many times and never made it. My last job hunt, I failed 21 on-sites before I got an offer. So a lot of my job decisions were made by just who will take me. And I think there are two things that I knew I wanted. At every job, I knew that I wanted to be surrounded by smart, talented people, and I wanted to be working on a problem that I cared about. And so fortunately, those two bars, I was able to maintain those bars everywhere I worked. And I love the teams that I've had the opportunity to work with. But I would say my career was not as directed as it looks in retrospect.
Where does that grit come from? Because it's a lot of people who have 21 on-site interviews and then get rejected all those times. They end up kind of maybe deciding that, they're not going to focus on their career path as much, or maybe they're going to go try to do something a little bit less, strenuous or a little bit less kind of out there and whatnot. but you decided to kind of keep pushing. Where did that come from?
I mean, well, part of it is I had 2 little kids at the time, so it's like you got to get this job. But I did tell my wife after it was sort of the same situation. I was like, I have this one last interview loop at Cloudflare. If I don't get this, I'm going to start a company because no one else is going to take me. And then I got that job. So I guess it's come
really
down
well under pressure. I guess is what we're learning.
It's come down to the wire a couple times.
That's incredible. So, I mean, maybe you kind of were at Cloudflare, you ended up kind of progressing your career and whatnot. What kind of gave you the confidence eventually? You're like, okay, I've met all these, various milestones and whatnot. And I kind of maybe proved to myself that I can get these jobs at the very last moment. Like, what was like the impetus for trying to actually start something?
Yeah, I guess I've been looking for the idea that I wanted to work on for years. So even while I was at all these different jobs, I was trying to come up with startup ideas. Google used to have this Google Questions that you could app that you could run. So basically, it was kind of like running ads. You could run surveys, and I think they were like $1 a question. But if you did a 1-question survey, it only cost 10 cents a question. So for years, I would have this survey running in the background, and it just had like 1 question. It's like, what is the biggest problem that you are having at your job? And it would just go to random people. I got thousands of responses to that. And over the years, I would look through that and be like, what things could I solve here with software? And I had like a running spreadsheet of business ideas. And I never found an idea that I felt like this is something that I could work on for a decade. And I knew that I had a very short attention span. Like when I get good at things, they stop being fun for me. I like learning new things. And so like, what is the problem that would maintain my interest for a really long time? I never found that. And it wasn't really until I had kids and, especially during COVID, we started like trying to teach them, not just teach them, but teach them to teach themselves. Mm-hmm. And that, that had been a very important value to me my entire life. And I realized, this is working much better with my own kids than I expected. I think other families could do this. It was also harder than it needed to be. And I felt like other families could do this if they had better tools. And so that was the first time there's like, okay, like here's an idea that I could work on for a long time. I would really enjoy. And also, everybody in edtech seems to be really bad at doing edtech. It's just like it has this reputation as this really tough industry, but I kind of have this like, I'm a little afraid to say it, but I kind of have this like it's a skill issue thing. Like, yes, it is really hard, but I think a lot of people are making just decisions that I see as kind of questionable. Like you really only need one thing for a business, and that's positive unit economics. Like you have that, if you have that one thing, you have a business. And you look at all these ed tech companies out there and you're like, do they even have that one thing? Do they have like a repeatable positive unit economics model where they can acquire a customer for less money than that customer is going to pay them? And I think for very, very few of them is the answer yes.
So you make it sound so easy. It's like you would think, but then it's like Uber, they made it somehow, or maybe TBD. But to your point, a lot of businesses just never get there. But you're right. It's very logical. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you can kind of get by for a while if you can convince investors that you will have positive unit economics in the future. And then, if you want to be a VC funded company, like you also have to convince people that in addition to those positive unit economics, the market is going to be big enough, your moat is going to be strong enough, all that sort of stuff. But like the question of like, is this going to be a viable business kind of just boils down to, can you get customers who are going to pay you more money than it costs you to acquire them?
Totally.
There's three kind of maybe more buckets of founders. There's the complete outsider founder who comes into an industry and, actually their fresh perspective is really helpful because they're not like taking anything for granted. There's obviously on the other end of the spectrum, there's the folks that are experts, and because of that expertise, that allows them to break into things a little bit more quickly. And then there's some folks that have like a little bit of maybe expertise enough to be dangerous, but not too much so that they're kind of set in their ways. Curious, kind of where did you see yourself along that spectrum? And in general, for founders, like how do you kind of, if you're talking to a founder who's kind of thinking about starting something potentially in an area where they're not like at the expert level, like what do you kind of tell them, or what would be your advice for them?
I think it helps to approach these problems with an open mind. I think a lot of times, especially outside, Yes, maybe in hard tech, you have to be a deep expert. But I think what we've seen is a lot of times, even in hard tech, you can build that expertise good enough to build something really impressive. I think a lot of times the people who do have deep expertise are sort of entrenched in looking at problems in certain ways, or they're pushing on the wrong thing. I think really the opportunities come when you can look at an industry and realize that someone has not identified the correct core problem. Like the root problem has not been identified correctly. And there's an opportunity to push on that root problem in a way that no one else has. And a lot of times, if you see a root problem differently from a lot of other people in the industry, then it's easier to push on that than you would expect.
I'm really curious about going back to what you mentioned about using this or kind of developing your company because of your experience with your own kids. And you talked about other ed tech companies or a program it seems like they were doing that worked better than you expected. What were you designing or testing with that resonated so well?
I guess I should go back to my own education. So when I was in school, I started school and my dad had worked with me when I was young. And so I was basically a year ahead in math. And so when I was in elementary school, I would just go for math class. I would go to the next grade up during that math class, and then I would come back to my regular class for the rest of the day. And so that worked really well until third grade, because my school only went up to third grade. So there wasn't a math class for me then. And so starting that year, instead of going to the next math class, I just did independent study. So during math class, I would go to the back of the classroom with my math book. I would study out of it for like an hour. And then the rest of the day, I would rejoin the class and do that for the rest of the day. And that just worked really, really well for me. That's basically how I did that from third through sixth grade. I ended up moving as fast as I want. I hardly had any homework. I didn't have any homework. I ended up way ahead of everybody else. And then I ended up taking calculus in eighth grade just because I was able to move so quickly. And so when I saw all these accelerated programs getting cut and deprioritized over the years, essentially the only way that I can guarantee that my kids' education needs will be taken care of no matter what is to make sure that they can teach themselves. And so that was a priority in my house from an early age. I helped my kids kind of teach themselves to read and then teach themselves math, then teach themselves computer science. And for all of those things, we were using off-the-shelf computer programs, off-the-shelf software. And all that stuff sort of got the job done, but all of them had issues. Like there would be they're all designed for teacher-led group-paced classrooms. And so there are all these little issues around, like the UX is really bad, or they don't teach this thing because they assume that there's a teacher there who's going to teach it. And so sitting there with my kids, I could patch those holes, but it was also really clear that, this stuff is 90% of the way there. It only needs to go the last 10%. The last 10% is usually the hardest. But if you can take it that last 10%, it unlocks this completely different paradigm where instead of having group-paced classrooms, you can have individually paced learning. And if we can do that, that can be a real paradigm shift.
What was that early process then, kind of realizing this problem that exists? You realize that, these programs can kind of work, but they're not all the way there, and you're kind of patching up the holes. What was like the process from kind of that realization to like maybe the earliest versions of what Mentava became?
Okay, I think the story of how did I come to believe that there's a viable product here, I think is a little easier to understand. So maybe I'll start with that. And so essentially from when my kids were young, I've been starting them with various pieces of off-the-shelf software, first trying to get them reading, then trying to get them to learn math. And it just worked much better than I expected. So one of my kids was reading at 4, and then, his little sister, who was 2, was like, I want to do that too. And I thought, okay, there's no way you're ready to learn to read, but I'll give you a shot. And then she learned to read at 2. So I was like, okay, well, this is exceeding all of my expectations. And I told other friends about that, and most of them were like, oh, that's nice, but I don't really want to take that on with my kids. But there were a couple ones who were like, oh, this is really interesting. Can you show me how to do that? And I thought, yeah, I would love to show you how to do this. I think education is super cool, and unlocking all these opportunities for kids to understand the world better at a young age is really, really fun. So I gave them tips. At first, I pointed them to the piece of software that I use, and that wasn't working for anybody because the software was really janky. It had a lot of issues. So then I said, okay, I will give you the software that we're using, and also I will coach you. So I will coach you as as sort of like a parent coach, coaching you as a parent, but also maybe I'll do some tutoring for your kids. That got kind of tutoring and got kind of time consuming. So I was like, okay, I will record some videos and like I'll send those to you. Like, can I make this a little more scalable? And I kind of got some interest and some traction there. And that was when I started to think, okay, like this is a problem that people want that I seem to be able to help them with. And it's something that I really care about. Could I do this on a larger scale, like a larger scale tutoring? And so the first idea I had was really almost that, like a tutoring wrapper wrapped around existing software. Can we get away without even having to build our own software? Can we build like a scalable tutoring wrapper? And so I had one of my friends who was at Facebook post on the Facebook parents group and say, hey, like I have this friend who's trying to do who has this idea where he can teach 2 and 3-year-olds to read. Would anybody be interested in just working with him like for free? And I got a bunch of people who were like, yes, I would love to try that. And so I gave them the same piece of software that I had and connected with them over WhatsApp. And it's like, okay, I will do this, cut some coaching. I'll be on call like 24 hours a day. And a few things came out of that. One was that people had a lot of trouble with the software. So it started to become really clear that the software wasn't good enough. I also saw that all the people were having basically the same problems. So I was able to have kind of I had a Google Doc full of all the responses that I send over WhatsApp and a collection of videos that were all the same videos. And I would send them all to the same people because everybody ran into the exact same problems. And that's when I started to think, okay, like this could maybe be scalable. But then I still had the open question of like, but does it actually work? And I would say at that time, for a lot of families, it didn't, but there were a few for whom it really did. And they're 2-year-old, mostly 3-year-olds, not very many 2-year-olds work, but there were a couple 2-year-olds who were learning to read, and their parents were just blown away because here are their kids doing something that they didn't think was possible, that everybody told them wasn't possible. 2-year-olds can't learn to read, 3-year-olds can't learn to read. And then they found out that not only is this possible, but my kid is so smart that they can do it. It was a really magical moment for them. It was a magical moment for me to see that happening. And that was when I started to think, okay, like there's something here. What is that thing and how do we make it work for more people?
I guess as someone who does not yet have a kid and has not used this kind of software before, I'm curious like what the experience is actually like for your kids who are using Mentava today. Like what is their experience and how do they like progress through the different lessons and learning?
Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting question because this is maybe one of our contrarian takes, which is that the learning curriculum for learning to read, for example, it's kind of a solved problem. Like we know how to teach kids to read. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. There's room for optimization around the edges, but largely, you can get this book, Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons off of Amazon. It costs $17 and it's just phonics. And like that is how kids learn to read. Now the funny thing is our schools don't agree on that. So there's still like something like half the schools have not, like, even though it's like, this is one of the clearest answers in education. Half the schools don't teach reading this way. So you have to wonder like, why is that happening? But like, this is how you teach reading. So that problem is more or less solved. What is not solved is it's really hard. It's really time consuming because there's 50 sounds in the English language. So you've got to learn all of those. You've got to learn the letter sound associations. You have to learn to blend all of them. So it's just putting in the time over the 6 to 12 months that it takes to do all of that to get the kids reading. And so it's really motivation. And the interesting thing about that is that motivation is also a solved problem from gaming. We know how to do motivation. You walk into any, I mean, this is kind of a bad way to put it, but you walk into any casino in Vegas and take a look at the slot machines. We have solved motivation. We have cracked that nut. So the question is like, how do you put those together into one product that is actually solving both academics and motivation at the same time? And how do you find a business model behind that actually works? Because everybody else who has tried to do that has tried to go mass market. And when you go mass market, then the market forces push you towards edutainment. And so that's what you see in most of the other ed tech products out there.
How did you land on the business model? So maybe talk a little bit more on that, because I feel like, to your point, that's something that has never really been solved in many cases in ed tech and whatnot.
Yeah, I think there are some interesting facets of our business model that we haven't talked about publicly yet. So we're kind of keeping that under our hat. But I would say at a high level, this is maybe another contrarian take on education. Maybe why I would say I would say a lot of people go into edtech out of a sense of idealism and wanting to make a difference, which I think is really noble and really important. And it's hard to succeed unless like you had that sort of mission-driven mentality. But I think if you are too idealistic, you end up building stuff for the world you want to live in rather than the world you actually live in. And I think in the world we actually live in, most people, the job to be done of school for most people is not education. It is childcare. And that is why we simultaneously see all these problems with our schools not educating our kids to the level that we feel they should be, but also like an 80% satisfaction from parents about schools, because for most families, schools are doing the job that needs to be done. So the niche of parents who feel like my child is being deeply underserved by this school, their potential is so much higher, they could be learning so much faster, is a very narrow segment of the market. And so when you have a product that only a narrow segment of the market is willing to pay for, what do you have to do to make that viable? You have to charge a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
Now, I think the cool thing about that is if we have a product that everybody can benefit from, but only a narrow segment of the market is willing to pay for, what we can potentially do in the long term is we can charge to the people who really value our product highly and have the financial resources to pay for it. We can use that group to subsidize availability for the rest of the population who can maybe benefit from it, but maybe aren't willing to pay for it. And so we have some ideas about how to make that work out in the long run.
On that note, on maybe a narrow niche of the market, there's also a narrow niche in the market that, for reasons that I cannot explain logically, don't even like what you're doing to begin with. And so, I mean, this incredible phenomenon, and you write brilliantly about this in Pirate Wires, which I recommend anyone to go ahead and read. But there was this person who kind of took offense to the idea of essentially like accelerating childhood learning. That's not even hyperbole. That's exactly what they took offense with. And would love to hear more about that story from your perspective, and how kind of getting canceled was kind of this interesting moment that you took advantage of brilliantly.
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting thing, because there are lots of very legitimate reactions that you could have to what we're doing. For example, does this even work? Like that I think that's a very, very fair criticism of Mentava. And I think we only have a moderate level of confidence in what we're building, and I think if you ask us about where our product is going to be in a year from now, we'll have a much higher level of confidence. So like, does this even work? Very fair criticism. I think a lot of people object to, are concerned that if you teach kids to read too early, it can be too much pressure and it might turn them off of reading. And my belief is that like, if you do it gently and you make it fun, like that's not something you have to worry about. But that wasn't the criticism here at all. The criticism we got was that teaching children reading and math is bad. And it took me a long time to understand, like, where is this criticism coming from? And finally, someone kind of explained to me that in sort of like, there is sort of like a communist Marxist perspective that says labor is bad. And so therefore, turning people into potentially productive labor workers is bad. And so therefore, it is virtuous to leave children sort of ignorant and basically like ignorant and unproductive for as long as possible, because then they can't become labor, which would be bad. And I think that, and it's kind of a nutty philosophy, but like that's what we got canceled by, and it's kind of the perfect message to get canceled by, because 99% because like it's very loud, it's very out there, but 9% of the population who see that are like, this is nuts. And so,
taking a step back.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Taking a step back. Who was even this person that was putting out this criticism? Emily something, like I didn't even recognize her name. Was she involved with you in the past and she tweeted at you before? Or was it completely random? I just found that to be so peculiar.
Yeah, she is, we don't know her. She is just a random, I guess, ultra progressive, very online conspiracy theorist in San Francisco, who has, is very upset at Gary Tan and a bunch of other sort of moderate, progressive, moderate reformers in San Francisco politics there. Her criticism of Mentava was that she believes that we are collaborating with Replit and Gary Tan to undermine child labor laws. And so I will just, go ahead and say that like that is not in fact what we are doing. Um, but yeah, so she put us on blast, and I woke up in the morning. I happened to see her tweet. Someone else had retweeted it, and I was like, okay, I guess I should go in there and respond to it. And her own followers were already replying to it, being like, actually, this company teaching kids to read and teaching kids math, that actually seems pretty good. So like her own followers were already pushing back on her. So I was like, my work here is done. I don't even need to touch this.
Yeah.
But it was kind of the perfect way to get canceled. Lulu Maservi, who writes a lot on marketing comms, I think she's fantastic. She kind of, one of her recurring themes is that your company is going to have haters. And the thing is, you want haters. More startups die from not having people pay attention to them. And so haters those are people who are paying attention to you. They are signal boosting you. And most people criticizing you weren't going to be your customers anyway. So let them signal boost you instead. And so, I think from that perspective, it was not a very scary morning. It was actually a very, very delightful morning, and turned into a very, very fun couple of days.
Well, so to that end, like you get the tweet, and then it sounded like you're interestingly enough, in the Pirate Wire's article, you kind of talk about your own personal progression on how you wanted to react to this moment. At first maybe just like letting sleeping dogs lie, so to speak, and then you kind of you tweet about it yourself, and then eventually you get like multiple tweets with like hundreds of thousands and then millions of views and whatnot. So just curious, like, how did that progression in your head? It's like, hey, there's this crazy moment that's existing, like going from like, okay, this is just kind of funny, to actually we can capitalize on it.
Yeah. So we had a pretty clear launch plan at the time, which was we were probably 6 months away from putting something in front of people. And then that was going to be a very soft launch, because we knew that we needed another 12 months to really continue to iterate and polish on our product, to get it to where, like, the level of quality that we wanted it to be at. And then after that, we expected we'd probably spend another 12 months working on marketing and trying to figure out messages that resonate and where to reach our target audience, with the goal of really being at cash flow positive in like 2 years. And so when the first deposits started, so when we got put on blast by Emily, we didn't have an app in the App Store. We didn't have a sign up page. There was no way to log into our app. It wasn't talking to a server. Like, none of that stuff was in place. And so we really had no infrastructure in place to support actual customers. And so all we had was a super bare bones Typeform sign up page and like a Stripe checkout that lets you put down a deposit. And so when the first deposits started coming in, we thought, okay, well, this is great. We weren't sure how we were going to get our first customers for our year of beta testing. Now we have some customers. And then
so immediately it's like, this is a net positive.
Yeah, like, this is great. This is how we will start our beta test. We are hoping to have 5 to 10 customers for our beta test. And we're like, okay, like, we will have 5 to 10 customers. And then more of them started coming in, and we thought, okay, we're going to have more than 5 to 10 customers. That's great, like more reliable data. And then more and more deposits kept coming in. And at a certain point, we started realizing, if we can convert a significant chunk of these customers, I think we've said publicly, we had enough to get us to cash flow positive. Like, we had enough signups to get us to cash flow positive if we converted everyone to subscriptions. So we were like, well, this is our goal to be at 2 years from now. We seem to be here now. We had better figure out a way to turn these deposits into customers as fast as we possibly can. And so that's when it stopped being like a wait list and started being our launch.
Yeah. So talk about like getting on the App Store, like even having like an early product that people can actually use, which it was in progress at that moment in time. Like, what were those moments like?
I guess it was just a mad scramble. We knew what we had to do. We had to submit to Apple. We had to get through their approval process, which we were anticipating, frequently can take weeks or months, depending on how picky Apple wants to be. We had to get a login, a sign up. We had to get subscriptions working. So the roadmap was very clear. It was just, we told the team, okay, we thought we had a couple months to do it. Now we have a couple of days to do it. How fast can we get through this? And we got through it in about a week, which was just like an all hands on deck, big push that required a lot of manual effort behind the scenes. And I just couldn't be more proud of, everybody seized the moment, and it's been paying off for us.
Has that?
Curious, Steph, have you faced anything like along these lines? And do you like want to, like, when these moments happen, are you trying to jump on it for Pin as well? Or like, how do you think about these kinds of moments?
Well, you know what's funny? I read the Pirate Wires article and I immediately was like, I need to find my Emily. How on earth do I find a hater? Maybe Leeor, that can be you. But I was like, if there's a service for me to like find some haters to rile up on Twitter, I was like, maybe this is our lunch plan. And I was going to say,
Emily is a service. It's
Emily oh my God, that's the name.
There's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and I was saying, the Pirate Hours article is amazing, by the way. I love how, throughout, obviously, you're thanking her despite her misguided criticism, etc. And your closing line was just brilliant. May all of you be saddled with similarly competent critics. I was just like, chef's kiss. That's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
I was going to ask, on that note, you mentioned originally your timeline was much longer to accomplish what you essentially accomplished in a week. Has that changed, or has this whole experience changed your perspective on launching sooner and maybe when you're quote unquote not ready versus like waiting until you're much more ready? Like, would you, now knowing what you know, change that timeline at all, even if this hadn't happened?
I don't think we could have launched this soon without Emily. I think what we've learned from that is that I had thought going in that teaching kids to read early is kind of like, it's more of a vitamin than a painkiller. And they always say, like, you want to build painkillers, like you want to solve intense pain for your customers because that drives the urgency and the willingness to pay for your product. And I think what I found from this is that teaching little kids to read is more of a painkiller than we expected, but for a very narrow segment of the population. A pretty narrow segment of the population. And I don't think we could have found that segment of the population without such like massive publicity and such a massive blast. And I think without that big marketing push, we probably would have been we would have been a vitamin for a lot of our early customers, and it would have been a longer, harder road. But now we have found those early adopters who love what we're building, who who are just so thrilled to see their kids learning to read. And hopefully with them, they will spread the word and tell other people who are in that same sort of, tiger mom boat that like there is a product out there for you. And that's how we can filter through and find our target customers.
Was talking to a friend of mine, just invested into this like AI teddy bear they're trying to create a teddy bear that can kind of have conversations with kids, which is super cool. But was talking to the founder a little bit about, the dual selling that you do to the kid and to the parent. And so with Mentava, like, how did you think about that element? And maybe, what you're accomplishing for the parents is different, obviously, than what you're accomplishing for the kids. But just curious how you think about like setting Mentava up for success for both folks.
Yeah, it's really hard because for us, we actually have three audiences, even though one of them is really not using the app as much yet. It's parents, students, and teachers. Because eventually what we really do want to support is independent study in schools, which means we need teachers buy-in also. We need teachers excited about the idea that these kids that they wanted to support in their classrooms, but you haven't been able to fully support, like there's now an option to unlock their abilities also. And so, yeah, we need buy-in from all those groups. Like right now, focusing on just parents and students, parents and students, parents and kids, it's a little bit easier because parents care about the results and kids care about the experience. And so it's sort of like curriculum for the parents, user experience for the kids. We know that if this is not an app that kids want to come back to and use every day, that's going to dramatically limit our market. So it has to be fun. It has to be delightful. Kids have to love learning from what we're building. And then if they do that and it's effective, then parents will happily keep using it and keep giving it to their kids.
How do you think about, you mentioned teachers, like, I think with every, like job out there, period, I think folks are wondering what's the future of their position going to look like. You could imagine a world like on both ends of the spectrum where teachers are still teaching the way they have been for, past 100 or so years or whatnot. Or there's a world with no teachers, or maybe teachers look a little bit different. There's one school in Austin called Alpha School that teachers actually are not really teachers in the traditional sense, but they're more like coaches as, folks have self-guided learning and kids have self-guided learning. So just curious, like, what's your relationship with the teachers and how do you expect that role to change over the course of time with products like Mentava?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that if you look far, far out in the future, there's no doubt in my mind that students will be learning at scale from software. I think that is actually quite far away, though, and I think teachers are going to be a critical part of our society for a very long time. And I think you could say the same thing about AI educational tools that you could say about textbooks, right? You can get why do you need a teacher? You can get a math textbook from the library and you can learn everything you need to know out of that math textbook. But it's really hard. And so better tools make it easier, but there's still a role for that teacher. And there are always going to be a few kids who can learn everything they need to know out of a textbook. I think AI teachers and software like Mentava probably increases the segment of the population that are able to progress very rapidly on their own. But it's still going to be a narrow segment, and teachers are still going to be critical for supporting those and supporting everybody else.
Teachers related or aside, in thinking about building out the team, you're a small team now, like how much do you want folks that have, traditional educational experience versus how much do you want folks like yourself that, again, are that outsider's perspective? Like, how do you think about like what the first, you have the first 5 or so folks or whatnot. How do you think about the first, eventually maybe 10 to 50, what does the ideal Mentava team look like?
So I'm a solo founder. So building that correct team, building the right team was something that we thought about pretty strongly from the beginning. And that was a large part of the strategy behind our fundraising round. I don't have a very famous pedigree. I don't have a large following on social media. And so a big part of the reason that we raised from a party round of named angels was to give ourselves that credibility to hire the tier of people that we wanted on the team. And so people take a look at our investor list and they say, okay, well, this company is saying that they can do crazy things. I don't know if I should believe them, but all these investors apparently believe them. So maybe I can give them the time of day and respond to their outreach email.
Speaking of your fundraise, I happened to see your article about your fundraise, and I thought it was incredible. I'm curious too, you talk so much about storytelling in that piece. And then you kind of talk about how that really kind of leveled up your fundraise as you started talking to folks. I'm curious, you guys have raised from so many incredible people, Gary Tan and Apology and so many other folks. Like, who was the first like major dream angel of yours to domino to fall, if you will? And how did that catalyze once you started getting like the first one or first few?
Quiet led our round. And Quiet introduced us to a couple people. And I think the first person who really started accelerating things for us was Austin Allred, the founder of Lambda School. And he heard the pitch and was like, yeah, this seems possible. Seems really hard. That's why no one has done it. But yeah, certainly possible. And like, if you're willing to grind it out, it should be doable. Okay, I'm in. And let me start introducing you to people. And so he introduced us to Eric Ries, Eric Ries is very passionate about education as well. He does some non-traditional stuff with his own kids. And then from there, Eric Ries is an amazing network that he was able to connect us to, and dominoes started falling from there.
Yeah, I love the line that you had in there about the reframing of how you think about investors. Like, investors, or the best interest from investors come when they feel like they're doing a favor to their friend, introducing them to you. And I think that's such a key point, because too many people think about it from their point of view, right? They're just like cobbling this together and trying to get around together. But really, you should be thinking about it from the person's perspective and what drives interest and momentum. And I thought that was so insightful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that before I got connected to Austin and Eric Ries, I had talked to many other angels and done very, very bad pitches for them and gotten a lot of no's and spent a lot of time iterating on the story and the way I was telling it. The product didn't change. The story and the way that I pitched it changed. And when I got to the point that I was able to tell a story that resonated with people and they thought, okay, like this, I get it. This is something that could happen. And it's an incredible opportunity. That was when our fundraiser really started to build steam.
Maybe talk a little bit about that storytelling unlock, like from A to B. What did that look like?
The two biggest problems I had early in the fundraise, the biggest one was focusing too much on the problem. And I guess I like focusing on the problem. Like, I think that's what makes me a good product manager, because I see like, this thing is broken, we should fix it. Like, what is the root cause here? Let's go fix that. And so it's kind of delightful when you find a root cause problem, because now everything is going to be better, because you've identified the root cause problem. All you have to do is fix it and everything is going to solve itself. I think a lot of people don't see the root cause problems in education. So to me, it's kind of delightful to point out, like, no, this is the problem right here, and we can fix it. But other people don't find that compelling. People want to know, what is the rosy future going to look like after you fix this root cause problem? Where I'm willing to take that as a matter of faith. If once you fix the problem, like, of course everything is going to be fine. But no, people want that rosy picture. So I had to get better at painting that. And then the other thing that is still really hard to describe is what are you actually building? What is this product? Like, why are you able to do like these incredible things that other people think are impossible? And it's really hard because we don't have any tremendous deep insights or like paradigm shifting technology. It's like we are taking known curriculum that is like not particularly revolutionary, and we are taking known sort of like motivation mechanics from gaming, also not particularly revolutionary, and we're just going to put them together, and we're going to do a really, really good job of it. And it's that last piece. It's like doing a really, really good job of it is what nobody else has been done. And that's just sort of like most products fail because of death by 1,000 cuts. It's not like one specific thing. It's like a lot of really bad things. And I think that there's like, you see this in games, you see this in a lot of products. A lot of products that achieve sort of paradigm shifts don't achieve that paradigm shift because they did one amazing thing. They did 100 little things really, really well. And like that's basically what we have to do in order to, if we can do 100 or 1,000, we can find these 1,000 little things and do them really, really well. That basically unlocks a new paradigm of learning, which is the ability for at least some very motivated kids to learn on their own without being gated by teacher time and teacher bandwidth. It basically unlocks this entirely new use case. And so that's the question. Like, can we find those 1,000 cuts that everyone else has died by and fix all of them?
I'm actually really curious. We talked earlier in this call about how, historically venture investors have had like a negative bias against ed tech because, we talked about the reasons why. I'm curious, in your pitching, did you find more pushback and scrutiny on the product piece or the business model, or was it a mix of both?
We didn't get a lot of pushback on the business model. I think people hear it and they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. The biggest question is the market big enough? And I think that's a very valid question. I don't know the answer to that either. And so that's part of the reason we have been less aggressive about raising money, even though we have the opportunity to now, because if the market is not as big as we're hoping it to be, I don't want to have like a huge investor stack to try like overcome to like get the team an exit.
Totally.
So in fact, I would say that actually investors have been very, very enthusiastic. Like investors love mission-driven companies. Everybody is passionate about education. Everyone with kids wants better educational opportunities for their kids. And like we're basically building a product that resonates so deeply with pain points that VCs specifically feel. It's like, I want my kids to have a better education. And this like is the one problem in my life that money doesn't seem to be able to solve. And we're like, we can solve that problem for you for a price. And so like
it seems like magic.
Yeah,
you know?
It seems like magic.
You see these kids reading, and it's like, what the heck is going on? These kids too, and they're reading. Like it doesn't feel real.
Yeah. So I think we have not gone investors get very excited about where we're building, and like it's a mission that resonates with a lot of people. I think there is a lot of concern about will we be increasing inequality, or will we be putting too much pressure on kids? And I think those are fair things to be concerned about. I personally am not concerned about those. I don't think they're going to be a problem for various reasons, but those are reasons for why some investors chose not to invest in us. And I think that's great. I think we want to have values aligned investors on our cap table who are excited about kind of our strategic direction.
I'm curious, actually, given your experience with Emily and this controversy that didn't even seem like it should be a controversy, but then kind of evaluating, I guess, real critiques that you've received from people, and that could be critiques that people have in the future. How do you think about positioning your company to either like cater to those folks, or are you going to lean into being more polarizing to kind of continue this trend of, I don't know, having your haters work for you in some ways?
Yeah, I think there's a number of criticisms that you can make in Mentava, and some of them are very valid, and we need to respond to them. One very common concern we have is screen time. Is how do you feel about screen time for kids this young? And I think we have an answer to that I feel very strongly about, which is I think that there's a difference. The reason screen time is bad is because almost every other piece of software out there designed for kids is designed to promote passive consumption. Like, it's designed to be like passive, consuming, addictive content. And like, of course that's bad. And active learning is very different. Active learning is almost inherently self-limiting because your brain gets tired after like 15 to 30 minutes of thinking really hard. And so like, it's just not a concern. It hasn't been an issue in my house, and I don't expect to be an issue for our customers. So like, that is a real concern that we have to address. And then there's the other concern about if you train kids, they will become productive labor, and then you'll be able to conspire with Replit to undermine child labor laws. I don't feel like we need to address that. And in fact, the more of that we get, the better, because other people can laugh at that and give us more visibility on Twitter. And that would be super.
Maybe before we get into rapid fire, just curious if let's say, Niels, you became czar of U.S. education for the day. No pun intended with, the communist Marxist canceling or whatnot. But let's say you became czar. What would you do? Like, there's obviously so many problems in the education system and whatnot, but what would be maybe the one thing that you would do to try to fix things?
The one thing that I see as a deep sort of root cause in education policy is a values issue. And when it comes to sports, we accept that kids have varying levels of motivation and ability. And so we match them up with kids who have similar levels of motivation and ability, varsity or JV or club or rec, so that every kid gets challenging and coaching that is appropriate for their ability. And everyone understands that's the best way for kids to have good experiences and grow in sports. And for some reason, when it comes to education, we throw all of that out the window, and we say, like, are you a really high achieving kid? It doesn't matter. We're not going to give you the opportunity to learn. Or are you really struggling? It doesn't matter. We're not going to give you the support you need to catch up. Everybody has to be at this one pace, at the same speed, being taught the same way. And if you're not the kid who's sort of like right in the middle of the pack at, to like the 30th to 50th percentile that this is designed for, you're going to have a really bad time. And I think we should move away from that and think about education a little more the way we think about sports.
I have one rapid fire question specifically for you that I've been dying to ask since the beginning of this call, which is, I am so intrigued by your Google survey experiment. And I'm so curious over the years, like, what kind of answers have you gotten? I'm sure some of them are crazy, or maybe you've seen patterns. I'm curious if any stand out to you, if you remember any.
The biggest pattern that stood out was 99% of the answers are really, really bad. Most people struggle to identify their own problems. And even if they can identify their own problems, they definitely can't come up with a solution. There were a lot of ideas that were real problems that had solutions out there. So one of them that I particularly remember was time tracking software for sort of day laborers or construction workers. And I was like, actually, that seems really useful. You have all these workers on your construction site. You need to be able to like track their time really easily. Like, they could have a phone. Maybe they don't have a smartphone. They can do it with SMS or something. Like, there's definitely a way to do this. And I was like, I could build this. This would be a great opportunity. And I looked, and there's tons of those out there. And and so either this is a problem that this particular business owner wasn't willing to pay the money for that solution, or it was not a problem big enough that they went out there to like trying to find a solution to solve it.
Fair enough. That's strong enough signal. So it's probably not worth pursuing. Cool. And just to wrap up, a few rapid fire questions.
Okay. Feel
free to answer top of mind, sentence or less type of thing. The first is the founder that you look up to most.
I think I would have to say Patrick Collison, and everything I hear about him is just wonderful. He's built a company, Stripe, that I can really respect. It seems to have a great company culture and has done a great job of continually innovating and moving into adjacent verticals, and it's just very inspiring.
What job would you want if you could not be a founder?
I think at this point, if I was not a founder, I would just focus on being a dad. I would, go find a beach in Portugal or someplace at a very, very low cost of living that we can just take some time off and focus on family instead.
You alluded to earlier some of the entrepreneurial endeavors that you did earlier in your life. I'm curious if any come to mind that were the most fulfilling or out there or memorable.
So the first way I made some money, some real significant money doing anything entrepreneurial was domain name squatting with only one domain name. And so basically, I studied abroad in Australia, and this is going to take a little more than a minute, but I think it's a fun story.
Please. Oh, yeah.
Go for it.
I studied abroad in Australia, and I had a friend there who bought the domain name. This was probably like 2000, 2001, 2002. I had a friend there who bought the domain name barnesandnobles.com. Now, the name of the bookstore is barnesandnoble.com. So he bought barnesandnobles.com. And he owned that domain name, and he totally forgot about it until he noticed that the server that it was pointing to was falling over like every single day. And he was like, why is the server falling over every single day? It was because everybody was typing in barnesandnobles.com to try and get to the
oh my gosh,
to that
that's
site.
So funny.
So he put an affiliate link on that page and just sent that to Barnes and Noble. And all of a sudden, he was making more money than any of us had ever seen. And we're like,
that's amazing.
This is a cool idea. What other misspelled domain names can we find that have affiliate policies? So I found one. I bought one domain name. It was not as good as Barnes and Noble's, but
can you share what it is? Or
it was harryanddavid.com with one D. So not Harry and David. Harry and David makes fruit baskets. That people like send at like Christmas times.
Amazing.
And so anyway, like kind of same thing. Like I put that up. I sort of forgot about it, and I got a small trickle of affiliate income until like people really send Harry and David baskets around Christmas time. So around like October, November, like it really started ramping up. And at one point, I got a call in my dorm room because when I signed up for their affiliate page, I had put my phone number down there, and they're like, "We were just curious." So basically, our top referrers are Google, Yahoo, and you. And we were just curious about like, what sort of magic are you working? And I'm like a sophomore in college. I'm like, I don't know. I tell my family, I tell my friends about it. And so I think at a certain point they cut me off, but I made probably about as much money from that as I made at a summer internship.
That's pretty amazing. That's a huge flex.
Yeah, I'll take that.
I think I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial family, so I did not know the right way to think about this. And at the time, I was like, so they gave me the money, they cut me off, and I was like, okay, take the money and run. I'm done with this. I'm not touching this again with a 10-foot pole. I think in retrospect, the right mentality is actually, I made thousands of dollars doing absolutely nothing. I should do a lot more of this. And I guess maybe that's a piece of advice that I would give to my children in the future.
Wow. We could have been talking to Niels Hoven, the domain name misspelled swatter.
So maybe
that's brilliant.
Maybe in hindsight, like that was the right call. So that I am not that person.
Two more. One is, what was your first like quote unquote real job?
I was a lifeguard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And the last one is any mega trend, could be related to Mentava or not related, that you're just excited about.
So I think AI is kind of the cop-out answer. And AI is kind of neat because when we raised our seed round, the idea that kids could learn from software was a very contrarian hypothesis. And now all of a sudden it's made the mainstream. And of course, everybody believes it. So I think that's a cop-out. I'm not going to say. I think what I am actually excited about long-term is the devaluation of elite college credentials, which was a big motivator for starting Mentava in the first place. I think everybody understands that like the college, the Harvard diploma, the Stanford diploma are not so valuable because of what you're learning there. They're valuable because of essentially the credential, the stamp that like this is a smart, accomplished person. And yet, even though everybody knows that these places are able to charge $500,000, for that credential, and that price is only going up. And I think this is absurd. Like that is a broken market that should not exist. And so I am happy to see those credentials becoming less valuable, and I think they will. I think and hope they will continue to do so and not cost $500,000 in the future.
I love that. That's a perfect way to end. Well, Niels, thank you so much for joining us. This has been amazing.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Super fun.
Thanks everyone for listening. You can find us at somethingnewpod.com. You can follow Steph at Steph Moy, MUI on Twitter. You can follow myself, Leeor, at LMushin on Twitter. Catch us again next time.
Cool. I bet it went well.